So the reason why there was a slight delay there and we have an empty chair is Kat Little, who I explained earlier, will be joining us. So Kat is the Chief Operating Officer for the Civil Service and Permanent Secretary of the Cabinet Office. As you can understand, is slightly busy. She is on the tube, I understand it, on her way here, but had to leave slightly later than she had hoped to. So Kat will come and join us on the panel when she gets here. But I did say we will keep to time, so we are going to carry on with our session. And as I said before, after this session, please don't kind of rush off, because there is a drinks reception and it's another opportunity for you all to network. So please do stay behind and have a drink on us. But our final session of the day, it's called The Next Steps for Government Transformation. And I think this is really our opportunity to sit back a little bit. So if you've been with us throughout the whole day, you'll know we've had a variety of kind of sessions on issues to do with data, on issues to do with AI, and we've got down into the detail of some of those topics. But I think what we want to do with this final session is to really sit back and think about, so what are the next steps for transformation, and how do kind of data and digital issues fit into that vision for government transformation going forward. It's a brilliant time to be doing this kind of session now that we have the new government in place, the new administration and their 5 missions. So how does all of this work fit in with those 5 missions? In addition to Kat, we have a great panel with us here. You've just heard from Thomas, so I think we don't need to introduce you again, Thomas, but I would say you are also here, not only with your Danish hat on, but you're here as a partner for Net Company as well. And there we have Kat joining us just in time. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kat.
Hello, so sorry to be so late. Apologies.
No problem.
I think you might have just done all the introductions, haven't you?
Well, I was just starting, and I was just saying this is a slightly different session to the ones we've had during the day, because we're going to kind of sit back, do that big picture, and think about how digital and data fit as we look forward to the future. And now we have the new government, the 5 missions, that whole transformation programme. How does digital and data fit into all of that? So we have Kat Little, Chief Operating Officer for the Civil Service and the Permanent Secretary to the Cabinet Office. We're also delighted to be joined by Emily Middleton, who is the DG for the Digital Centre Design, sitting in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. We've got Tim Ketton-Locke, who is the Deputy Director for the DX4D, which is the Digital Exploitation in the Ministry of Defence. And then, as I say, we have again with us Thomas Christensen, who's the partner at Net Company. Kat, I'm going to let you catch your breath for a moment. So I'm going to invite Emily first, if that's all right. To give us a sense, Emily, I think people will be interested because there's certainly been quite a few changes quite quickly. So in terms of the machinery of government changes, could you give us a bit of a sense of what's happened, who's moved where, and how do you see that new structure as being a kind of help in driving forward transformation?
Yeah, of course. And it's wonderful to be here today, so thanks for having me. So yeah, exactly as you say. So from July, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, DCIT, has sort of expanded a bit in scope and size to incorporate GDS, the Government Digital Service, CDDO, the Central Digital and Data Office, and also I.AI, the AI incubator. And that's really in an effort to try and kind of unite all those different efforts and capabilities in that digital transformation of public services kind of in one home, in one department, and also kind of make the most of all the synergies that exist with different kinds of kind of tech policy expertise elsewhere in DCIT. And the idea is really to help kind of drive forward some of those bigger kind of digital changes that we need to overhaul people's kind of experience of interacting with government so that it can be more personalised, more convenient, and save people time and effort. And that really builds on some existing work, such as making it much easier for people to log in to government services, to prove who they are. And as part of that, we're definitely thinking about how can that new sort of digital centre better remove some of the roadblocks that still exist to sort of data exchange, not just between central government departments, but also in the wider public sector. And I think you touched on the sort of the missions in your opening comments, and I think very much as we're kind of working through what the design of this looks like, we're thinking about how can this sort of new empowered digital data technology kind of AI centre really kind of help drive collaboration, not just within central government, but also kind of wider sort of with others kind of across the economy and at different levels of government and public services. And I think the final thing to say, the ideas behind this as well is that this is very much still a very close partnership with the Cabinet Office and with Treasury to make sure that kind of all the everything that kind of we need to undertake, still some kind of important kind of system reform pieces that CDDO has sort of started and been working on, that we really kind of have all the right levers to do that.
Thanks, Emily. I think there's a little bit of interference, so you might want to pick up the hand mic when we come to questions.
Sure.
Thanks so much for giving that opening. And Kat, just to explain, what we're doing is I'm asking each of you one question, but then after that we're going to throw it open to the audience, so it's very much a conversation, if that's all right. So as you heard from Emily there, she was saying she hopes it's still very much a partnership between kind of DSIT and the Cabinet Office. From where you sit in the Cabinet Office and also your role over the whole of the civil service, how important do you see kind of data, digital, all of the people here in the room who work on those issues as being in driving forward change?
Well, it is that. Can you hear me? Is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah?
We're
Can you
good.
hear? Oh, good. Marvellous. Great. Well, look, firstly, it's so lovely to be here. I love getting people who are excited about data together because you guys harness the most powerful and valuable tool that we have got in the future of government. And it is so exciting that we are bringing together policy and delivery in DSIT together. I think it's very, very exciting that we're able to harness all of the levers of the state to drive forward this agenda. I was reflecting earlier about how much has just changed since I joined the civil service, which was, many of you will have been here much, much longer. But when I joined only 13 years ago, I was really struggling just to get data within my own department. So I worked at the Ministry of Justice and then at the MOD. And you kind of think, surely it's mad that I've got this executive agency in my own department that I can't get information from. Whereas now, look at where we are. Yesterday my IPA teams were telling me how we now have one version of the truth for all project data across the whole of government. So data is moving on in such a fast and powerful way. And you think about where technology's taken us, the insight and the analytical tools that we've got. So my very passionate belief is that technology and data together is going to help us solve some of the biggest challenges of society today. And I don't know about you, but the reason I get out of bed every morning is because I'm in the civil service to make the country a better place. So when you think about the outcomes that data and technology can do together with brilliant policy delivery, with all of the multidisciplinary techniques that we've got, it's very exciting. And the thing that is super exciting in the Cabinet Office right now is our really important job of bringing together all levers of the state to deliver the 5 missions. And what an amazing and inspiring 5 missions they are. So, getting the NHS in a great place, growing the economy, having safer streets, opportunity for everyone, and to be a clean superpower energy. I mean, that is the long-term ambition. And we're being very, very focused on how we bring every single part of the state together over a long-term mission as a national endeavour. And data is right at the heart of it. So every single mission board has a data dashboard. It has evidence and trend analysis to help us understand what the problems are. And crucially, in setting that long-term vision, we're saying there has to be a long-term data metric that we are monitoring, that we can assess the health of progress and where we're getting to. So that's just one example. But, if we can't harness data and technology in delivering better outcomes for citizens, then we failed. And I just think it's a really exciting time of a new government, DSIT kind of taking that lead. And I really hope that the whole of the civil service can galvanise around that exciting endeavour for the country.
Fantastic. And I think one of the challenges that we've heard throughout the day to kind of digital transformation has been that joining up across some of these. And having that mission-led approach might be the thing that really cracks that.
And sorry, I should just very quickly, I should have said, one of the big missions I've got personally is to tackle some of the big issues in the civil service. So I'll be quite frank with you. I've kind of come into this job and looked at the state of the civil service and where we are. And we're basically saying there are three really big things we've got to sort out. There is a whole set of issues around pay, which you do not need me to tell you about. You feel it every single day. The second area is actually to make what we do digitally enabled. So the vast majority of the civil service are in operational delivery, and they haven't got the tools to do their job. It's that simple. And so we've got to really build data and digital delivery into the way in which the civil service delivers services for citizens. And then the final thing is to get our learning and development into much better order. I think we need a core curriculum. We need to own it. I should be coaching future generations in the skills that I've learnt. You should be bringing on the next generation. I think the model of outsourcing it and delivering it through third-party providers is not a great way to do it. So they're the three kind of pillars of what we're going to be looking at in the future, and data and digital technology is right at the heart of it.
Fab, thank you. I'm sure there are lots of questions already, but in terms of people that are passionate about data, so Tim, I'm coming to you now. So just in terms of the digital exploitation for defence, so DX4D, I think it's safe to say that's been a real front runner in doing transformative kind of programmes across defence. Can you give us just a flavour of some of the things you've already achieved, and maybe as this is looking ahead, what are the lessons learnt for others in terms of their transformation journey?
Yeah, thank you. And it is really great to be back here. I came here last year, and it's just a really buzzy atmosphere around AI and that moving forward. And it's great to see loads of those programmes and technologies being taken forward and applied across government, where before there was a slight nervousness about using them and how that's driving productivity in various departments. So DX4D was sort of born out of the inertia that sets in around trying to get approvals and everything aligned before you start doing something. And the second Perm Sec at the time, Lawrence Lee, said we need to be getting to outcomes quicker. And so out of a very small team, so at our dizzy heights, we're 15, we're currently only 8 people. And we're aiming to drive at some outcomes, which the DGG, which is the Defence Board, without the ministers, outlined we should be going at. So in the campaign advantage space, the advantage to the personnel on the ground, situational awareness, tooling, better C2, command and control, and better lethality, sensor to shooter. In the CD space, so that's capability deployment, trying to work out how we can look after our equipment better. So increasing platform availability by up to 50%, increasing the speed in which we procure platforms by up to 50%, and looking at interoperability and integration by default. And then the business operations side was trying to harness the analytical capability to make people's jobs more interesting, to give people back more meaningful time, and to increase the productivity of the department. And over the sort of 2 years we've been operating, we've had a sort of number of successes. And what I'll do is I'll just go through what's outlined or driven those successes and then where they've come through. So the first thing is around collaboration and bringing users into the room really early on to understand what that need is. And that's bringing the right people into the room. And you can see that working across whole of government, so bringing in different departments to get user perspectives on that, to make sure that what you're supplying actually works. And you don't just build something in isolation. And that was really key around HiMast. HiMast is an operation which is going on in 2025. And it was just stagnating. And we brought the users into the room, we brought different government departments into the room, and we said, to deliver this, what do you need to do? And they spoke about it, and what was taking absolute months went into weeks to be able to deliver a successful outcome there. Strong sponsorship and driving forward from a DG level is really, really important to own that and resource it to make sure that it's embedded in. And Andy Stark's done a fantastic job down in DNS at driving that forward and the outcomes there. Being agile, so we work in sprints and that agility, so making sure we're focused on one thing to deliver rather than putting lots of energy into lots of things and getting to no outcome. And then making sure that when things aren't working, we've then stopped them. So we looked at vetting and whether we could do that, site access across the site, whether we could do it. It's just too big. It's too complex. So we decided to stop it after 6 weeks of looking at it. Getting to proof of value, so we talk about MVPs, or we talk about initial operating capability, but proving value early. At the moment, we're looking at a tool which is looking at PQs and FOIs, answering them, and we've set on a curated data set, so all the historic 10 years worth of PQ FOIs, and we said, if a question comes in around tanks, how many questions have come in around tanks before and who answered that. Then you can copy and paste the FOI in. You can see who owns it, where they sit, what information they put in it. You can then put exemptions on top of it so it can blank it out. It can give you a template to reply back to. But it's clunky. You type in the question first of all. It tells you that there's nothing there. You put in the exemptions and it starts exempting everything. But it proves the value of what we're doing early, and getting into the user hands and how they're using it means we're putting our energy and our money into solving the problems that are being caused by the user using the tool, rather than thinking they might want this solution in place. The final thing is just being that force multiplier. So government furnished equipment, there's about £5 billion worth of assets that we've given to industry to look after and help us maintain. And they were looking at standardizing data. We've talked a lot about today about standardizing data before you can use analytical tooling on it. And they developed the government forum where you can go on and do a Microsoft form. But we said, well, why don't you think wider than that? And they said, oh, the problem is the DBS look after that. We don't speak to the DBS. So we brought them together into the room, did that collaboration, and said, well, how are you using that? I said, well, we spent 3 months looking at all these spreadsheets, spotting all these problems, and then we go back to the companies, we ask them for an update, and some of them reply. And we said, well, why don't you just use some analytical tooling to do all that? And what was taking 3 months is now done in minutes. And then they spend the time looking and investing in the companies that aren't doing the returns and helping them and training them and equipping them to do that. So I think that those are the sort of big areas. I think the things to avoid that you want to do is just too much governance. We like to layer things in layers of process, and empowering teams to deliver is really, really key. If a decision takes longer than 5 hours to make, we say there's too much governance in place, so we have to remove it.
Interesting, thank you, because we've spoken a lot about the governance of data and the need to get that right, but there has to be that balance, I think. Thanks so much, Tim. Lots of lessons learned there, things to do and not to do. And then, Thomas, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, we heard from you just beforehand about how Denmark has managed to do so well in this area. Thinking about the UK and lessons for the UK, over the coming years. Now we have this new momentum, we've got the new government. What would your advice be in things that we should be doing here, that we're not already doing maybe?
So I think when we talk about development and you reach certain maturity level, so for instance, Denmark is getting a little boring. We do talk about AI. We do have a lot of data we can do AI on, but we are very focused right now on how do we responsibly use AI. So we talk about how do we build actually a governance, not the 5-hour one, but a governance around how do we use AI responsibly in different areas of government. How do we manage it? How do we ensure that we can actually backtrack the decisions that are being made, use all the data we have? Cybersecurity, huge. We have to, as we produce all this data, as we use it in different contexts, we are in a situation across Europe where we are vulnerable for attacks. So we spend a lot of time on that. And then I said to you when I was on stage here, digital inclusion. No matter how well you design your systems, there will be part of your audience, part of your citizens, companies that will struggle. And you have to be able to support them. And then on a European level, I work very closely with the EU, and we are developing an infrastructure right now for what we call the identity wallet. And the law basically states that by 2030, every citizen in the EU, I know you're not there anymore, which I really am sad about, but must have one digital identity that can be used across borders. Also allowing them to carry their data with them and share it with government, with other parties, both private and public. This will change how we are thinking about data today. Today we are thinking about collecting. But in the future, we will think about data ownership. When will the data be needed? And does the owner of the data allow me to use it in these different situations? So this is something that Europe is leading the charge on, and that is something that you will see actually much more discussion around in the data space.
It's interesting, the issue of digital IDs. I think we could have a whole day just on digital ID, and I think we'd probably need to talk about that separately, because it will be interesting which countries do have it and which countries don't going forward. Okay, we are going to have a conversation now for the rest of the time. Who has the first question to put to anyone on the panel? We've got a question down here from the lady in the national security crime agency. And gentleman over here. Yeah. Sorry, Brett, I'm going to make you run to the other side of the room after that. That's all right.
Okay, Carolyn Blami from NCA. So my question. So thank you very much for what you guys have said, and it's really exciting on how the transformation, how we can all in civil service be included. So my question really is trying to understand, as we map out how we can share data, utilize data moving forward, I'm thinking that we have people coming into civil service and in civil service in public sector where they just wanted to come in because they've got really great skills, but they're doing maybe roles that for whatever reasons, but they're not really motivated by those roles. But everything that's moving forward in civil service, in the public sector, is really exciting. They may be engaging in those things in their private time. How do we utilize those people, give them those opportunities to really be there at the forefront because they've got those skills, rather than them having to apply for a particular job? How do we keep them informed? For example, with what's happened with DSIT, today's the first day that I heard about that, and we're civil servants, right? So how do we have communication where people know what's happening in the civil service, in public sector, and then they can respond appropriately or even get themselves ready with those skills so that they can go into areas that's of interest to them?
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I like this question. How do we communicate better, I think, across the civil service of what's going on? But how do we motivate people who might want to move into some of these new areas? Kat, this is probably one for you to kick off.
Yeah, and it definitely is. And it's a great question. So comms in the civil service is quite a complex thing, as you probably know. And so we've just come off a summer of our usual Civil Service Live conferences, and we had about 25,000 people come to Civil Service Live. And I think that is just a wonderful annual way of kind of sharing and exciting the whole of the civil service about the transformation agenda. And the theme this year was innovation. So that's one big thing that we do. Every single week we have civil service weekly news. I was just looking at the edition for tomorrow. So that is just a really, it goes to nearly 500,000 people. I cannot even begin to tell you the technology that sits behind being able to send an email to 500,000 people. And then we have cascades to all of our departments, but it's never ever enough. So I really am open to lots of ideas about how can we share more of that excitement and more of the messaging. And I'm probably a bit in the centre of a little bit wary of the centre always being the people that talk about it, because I kind of think, you know, us kind of doing a top-down thing, it should be bottom-up and viral in capturing the great skills and ideas of the civil service more broadly. So I'm particularly interested in how we can kind of capture that bottom-up sense of excitement. And you asked about skills matching. So one of the things we're looking at is whether we could just have one single skills record for every single person in the civil service, so that we can better match people up to jobs that are available. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? It's like, wouldn't it be great if you could go on civil service jobs and go, here's my skills record, tell me which jobs match my skills, and instead of going through an application process, maybe just go, you know, as an employer, I could just go, oh, well, I can see that there are 400 people with these skills. I better go and ask them if they would like to come and work with us. And the other idea that I'm trying to steal from Singapore is they've got this, they call it their gig economy, which I don't think we would call here in the UK, but they basically have what they call short-term gigs, where they basically say, if you're really excited in a project for the next 6 months, like, tell us if you want to come and do it. And, you know, and we could have a kind of mutual agreement in the civil service that people could go, just for 6 months, I want to go and do something. So the old-fashioned, hierarchical, quite rigid structures of the old-fashioned civil service, I'm afraid, have to change, because they're not fit for purpose for what we do as a project-based, multidisciplinary organisation.
And it always struck me that people join the civil service, you've got all these things you do outside the civil service that are skills and talents and everything, and we don't utilise those, we don't know about them as well.
Yeah.
So very
because there's no way of sharing with your employer or with the people you work with that, by the way, I'm a trustee of a charity in my spare time. Like, if you want someone to help with fiduciary stewardship, I might know something about it. So I think a single skills record will help.
Anyone else want to come in on these?
Yep. Quickly come in. So one of that was an issue we had, the communication, how do you disseminate it? And I was very struck by, I don't know if other people have seen it, overheard in Waitrose. and you've heard people. So we created this Overheard in the Civil Service, where we met for 30 minutes a week, and we just discussed emails and news bulletins, etc., that we heard across it. You heard this person's moving here, have you heard this department's combining there, and how it affected us. But then we rubbed off against one another and pointed people in different directions. So I think there are things you can do at a local level which start becoming a catalyst and an attractiveness to be able to drive that forward. On the skills front, we're looking at trying to create a digital legion. So within one of the Army services we've got, you can join that as a reservist. You can then, without going through all the PT, the physical training that you need to do, and then you can use your digital skills. And we're looking at extending that across industry. So you can do a 6-month secondment, come into defence or across some of the other services, and use your skills there, and then harness them back into industry, and whether we can actually do that across. So they're two things we're actively trying to do.
Thanks. Emily, did you want to go?
Yeah, that sounds really cool, by the way. I'm going to steal that idea. I just wanted to come back on your question about knowing what's sort of happening in DSIT. I think just to say we're sort of in the early weeks of the sort of designing what that digital centre is going to look like, and we've initially really focused on colleagues in GDS, CDDO and I.AI and in the wider department. And one of the things we've done as part of that sort of initial engagement and really understanding what are the strengths that we can build on, what are the future opportunities, is we've also said to people, if you want to self-organise workshops where you think we're missing something or there's a really good opportunity there, then please do. And people have done that, which I think is brilliant because it's sort of surfaced all kinds of other ideas that we didn't come up with. And I think it's, again, that sort of idea of not things being sort of always too top-down or structured, but giving the space for people to come up with their own ideas and organise as well. And going forward, we're really keen to find ways of engaging the sort of digital and data community across the civil service. I mean, I think it's just such a powerful asset if we've got around 30,000, really skilled digital data, tech, AI people just in central government. And then we've also got, tens of thousands more in the NHS and the wider public sector. And CDDO has been doing some really interesting work looking at kind of how they can better sort of strengthen and grow and support that profession. And that I just think has enormous potential that we're only just beginning to tap into.
Thanks. We've got a question over here.
Good afternoon. Andrew from the Central Digital Data Office. So I lead on a lot of the system reform, system transformation stuff that Emily referred to it previously. It was a bit of a question actually from Thomas in your previous session, talking about private partnerships. And it's one thing that I think we hear a lot of from other international comparators, whether you're looking at India, Estonia, or the rest of it, the kind of the really close relationship between the public and government and private. I've not been in government long enough, but I know that public-private partnerships in the UK might send a shiver down some people in this room. But I just wanted to know, from your perspective, Thomas, is there anything that we can learn and anything that you can suggest through that journey in Denmark? And then to Kat, Emily, and Tim, how can we better use that partnership in the future to deliver on the aspirations that we all have around digital and data?
Thanks. Thomas.
Yeah, I think in Denmark we had the same problem that I think we see over here now, that government kind of competes with the private market in certain areas. And so it's difficult for the private market to basically be a partner. And I think over time we've succeeded in changing that. And when you step in and become a true partner, it involves a lot more. So let me give you an example. When we were building infrastructure in Denmark, we built not just infrastructure, we also agreed with government, how can this become an export for Denmark? How can I use this infrastructure, for the next thing? So we make commercial models where they take ownership, but they let me retain IP, for instance, so I can take it to another country and they can have their ownership. So I think it involves a lot of different aspects. But first of all, it is something where government needs to be very clear. We would like to use the private market for this. And don't play in their sandbox. Basically, do your business and then bring in your partners. And if you can draw that line, you will have very, very successful partnerships with the private market.
Thanks. Kat?
Yeah, I might answer this from a broader partnership perspective, because I think the same principles apply to data and technology. And at a very simple level, there is nothing that we do in the state that doesn't involve partnership with the private sector and the public sector more broadly. And I've spent many, many years of my career developing really mature, sophisticated partnerships with the private sector because, gone are the days where you can just have a linear supply chain where you contract and subcontract and you just all take a bit of the margin and you all just do the bit in the contract that you're meant to do and your bit of the widget that you've got to build. Sadly, we are still doing quite a lot of that. What we really need to be moving to is co-design of the outcomes we're trying to achieve, to be at the table together with all of our partners that we have to work with so that we can kind of work out, like, how do we use those skills at the start of concept and throughout the whole life cycle of a project, whether that's a technology project or a major military capability. And actually, I spent a lot of my time at the Ministry of Defence redesigning the strategic supply chain to make that so. Like, you can't build a nuclear submarine if Babcock, Rolls-Royce and BAE are not sat at the table actually designing the submarine with you with the right outcomes and the right risk sharing in mind. So I think we have to completely reimagine the way we think about systems leadership and get much, much more strategic and sophisticated in therefore how we work together and not just see it as some sort of old-fashioned commercial arrangement.
So I know we have another question here, but before I know how much time to give our speakers, is there another question in the room? Because I did say at the start, I don't want anybody to leave here thinking, I wish I'd asked that, and I haven't. Yes. So we have 2 more questions. Okay, so if you answer yours, then I'll take those 2 together, but if you do your, thank you.
Sorry, Chris Page from BDUK. I think that the transformation from AI is a different type of transformation. What I mean by that is we need a mechanism to collect people's assessed impact of AI with their jobs from the ground up. So people on the front line, they can see how, because they've got access to this in the public domain, we're fortunate because a lot of our data is in the public domain. People are working with AI, which is available, and then identifying use cases, but it's coming from the bottom up, very much so. And I'm not sure that we have a mechanism of collecting these ideas which are coming in from the bottom up, and then identifying which of those are, oh, that's the same as all of these. So in other words, bringing that together and then also sharing that.
So a mechanism for collecting ideas for where AI and new tech might be used, and then we'll answer that one, and then I'll take the last 2 together. Who would like to answer this question about? Yeah.
Can I just give a comment there? Because I have personally rolled out a lot of systems, very automated, and we ran into this exact problem, that once we rolled them out, we couldn't understand how come we're not saving the money. I mean, we're automating all these processes, and it's still taking this long. And what we found out was we had not spent enough time explaining to the caseworkers what we were doing. So they were just running the old process because they did not trust that the robots we had put in there would actually do the job as well as them. So we were actually doubling up on the work. So I think one of the things we saw was we need to spend much more time basically educating the people that are going to use these tools and basically change the culture around what is their new role. And we failed miserably on that.
Yeah. Anyone else want to answer?
Two very, very quick things. I mean, I could not agree more with you. The best ideas come bottom up in my experience. So one big plug for one big thing where we're talking about innovation in the civil service. It's all about how do we inspire, educate, empower people to innovate from the bottom up. That is the whole point of it. I would be a bit more optimistic, though, because I think if you look at the DWP and HMRC and a couple of the really forward-leaning, technologically driven operational departments, they're doing this brilliantly. And, it's often a matter of you don't know what you don't know. So we did think, should one big thing actually be about AI next year? Because if you don't know what tools are available and what the power of those tools are, how on earth would you know that was something you could use? So I think they'd be 2 things we've got to take forward.
Thanks, Kat. Right, I think it's Anur who's got the mic. I'm going to take you, Anur, and then I think there was another question. We'll take both. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Ankur Saini, U.S. Department of Transportation. As a fellow civil service employee from across the pond, I've personally seen a lot of federal agencies, state government agencies that are in year 9 of a 3-year transformation journey. And I just wanted to know, have you painted a picture or of a vision of what done looks like from a transformation perspective, so you're continuously improving after that? And have you put in some sort of controls or monitors to say we're on track or not?
I love this question. So if you didn't quite catch it, Anua from United States was saying there's a lot of departments that are in year 9 of a year 3 transformation program. So how do you kind of explain the vision in that continuously improving kind of world? Thanks, Anua. And we'll take the second question, then you can answer one or both of these last 2 questions. Thanks.
Hi, just to say one big thing did work because I'm here today because of that, so thank you.
Yay, excellent.
So I'm Dion from DESNES, and I'm in digital, but I'm learning to be an SA or cloud architect. But I thought, in terms of civil service, like all the training, I think mentorship is really important. I think how can we use that to perhaps galvanise those people that are doing courses or increasing their knowledge or would love to get into this sort of space, really.
Yeah. So mentoring, the importance of mentoring, especially in the digital and data professions, the importance of mentoring. 2 great questions for us to finish on there. Tim, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on one or both of those?
So the first thing I think is we often sell change programs or transformation programs as though they are going to reach a utopia and an end, and we need to be clear that you're constantly changing and evolving with circumstances and things that are going on externally. So being clear around that. And I think the big thing to do is change the culture and the behaviours that go with that. And Thomas alluded to that the behaviour's not changing even though the tool's in place. And I think if you explain to people why we're putting the tool in place and how it's being used is one thing. If you bring the user into the room at the very beginning and understand the problem they're trying to address, then you can make sure the tool is fitting to what they need. And then it's making sure that that training and equipping is in place to be able to support them in that. So I think that's one thing, and making sure that momentum's there. In terms of the second question about mentoring is really important. I'm a mentor of 3 people. I think it's really important to meet up with them, part of the Catapult mentoring scheme across there with 2 people there. And imparting that knowledge on, and also using reverse mentoring for how you can improve yourself is really important. But again, it's that opportunity to share. We talked about that communication at the very beginning, what's going on, and you can mentor people at different parts of the organisation and be able to share what's actually like down there. Am I getting the truth? And be able to actually pass that message back on to the very top of the organisation. So I find it incredibly beneficial. I think we should be doing more of it rather than less of it, and would encourage anyone who's not in that relationship to joining them in leveraging that.
Thanks. Emily, I'm going to come to you because you'll be thinking about setting out your new vision. What do you say in terms of Anua's question?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because I think sort of what you're getting at there is, some of the changes that we have to make in terms of the system reform that Andrew's sort of working on, and in terms of particularly kind of remediating and kind of getting to grips with legacy systems, do take a long time, and we sort of need to work at 2 speeds almost. We need to make real progress on that, as well as being able to kind of iterate and be able to sort of develop and continuously improve, particularly kind of user-facing digital services more quickly. I do think there's a role and an opportunity for the Digital Centre of Government to help set out that sort of overall unifying kind of long-term vision. But then, of course, different departments and particularly kind of mission-based sort of clusters are going to have their own sort of particular kind of visions under that. So I think, just to say, I agree with you. I think there's a real kind of opportunity there. And I think just to touch on mentoring and kind of upskilling, I think that's spot on, and I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of love working in the digital and data space, because I do think there's a lot of opportunity, and I've met so many really brilliant colleagues over the last weeks who have had the most fascinating career journeys, and I think particularly in professions like product management and user research, there's lots of good cases of people who have started in the civil service, maybe in a policy role or an operations role, and have been able to really, use those skills and move into sort of different positions in a way that kind of adds extra depth and richness and understanding of frontline operations or the policy context or whatever that you might not get elsewhere. So I think that's really brilliant. And I think my favourite example of that is, the fact that the whole kind of profession, if you like, of content design, which has now gone global in government digital units around the world, was invented by a civil servant who was at the time kind of writing for the web, a web writer, and who then sort of in the government digital service sort of really made the case for the fact that how you write and design content of different kinds makes a big difference to the way that kind of citizens can interact with services and with government. And I think that's brilliant. And I'm sure there's lots of future examples of that just out there. Just to say I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Thomas and then Kat.
So I think on the question of, and I've sat on a number of these transformation in year 7 and 8 where we should have been done a long time ago. I think what we learned was try not to be too narrow in your scope. Try and think portfolio. It is much easier when you have areas of your transformation that are actually succeeding. You know this is IT, so you know it's never going to go like you planned it. And if you can somehow spread your risk and be more, if you will, granular in how you are transforming. And there will be some successes and there will be some failures along the way. But it will become easier to deal with than if you're just sitting in a narrow slice that is just failing miserably. That's what you read about in the paper, and we try to avoid that. On the mentoring, I used to basically put it in contracts when I hired people that part of their assignment was to be a mentor. It is very, very important that when we invest in these very specific competencies, that some of that knowledge is being shared. And the funny thing is, most of these people that you hire will love this. They will think this is a special assignment. The fact that they have been told you need to be mentoring across your organization, it really has a powerful effect.
Thanks, Thomas. Kat, over to you for the final words.
Two sort of final additions to all of that. I mean, on your question about sort of long-term vision and how you keep on track with that, I think that is the number one question for us as we stand here at the kind of dawn of a new government with really big ambitions. And the thing that I've really learned over the years is it's great to have that North Star. And it's really important that we've got to have the outcome right at the forefront of what we're really trying to achieve, not the input, not the desired it's got to be a real genuine outcome that we can express. But we also can't be dogged about achieving it, because I'm a great believer you should stick to a plan and an outcome, but you've got to also admit that you're going to get quite a lot wrong. And the pace of technology means that you're going to have to constantly evaluate and admit when things aren't going in the right way, and to go back to the drawing board and kind of go through those constant iterations. And sadly, quite a lot of what we do in government is quite dogged determination to just keep going. Or a minister comes along and changes their mind and we all just go back to the drawing board. But, so I think particularly in our complex environment, that art of having that North Star and learning and failing and constantly thinking about how you keep going to that North Star is so exciting and so important. And I suppose on mentoring, it's the key to everything, isn't it? And I would also add, coaching as part of that. And they're obviously very different roles, but if you ascribe to the kind of 70-20-10 model of how people learn, that 70% of what you learn and develop on is coached to you on the job every single day by people who are sharing their expertise and their wisdom. And I don't think we do enough of that consciously in our roles. So I would kind of say, coaching and mentoring together is just absolutely essential.
Brilliant. I am looking at the clock, and sadly we have come to the end of our time, but what a fantastic session to end on, because I think we've reflected on some of those themes for the day, but it's great to also look ahead and see what's coming. Please do join me in giving a warm round of applause. If you don't mind just staying there for one moment. So also I want to say thank you to this panel, but I also want to say thank you to all of our speakers that we've had throughout the day. I know some of them are still with us here. So on that note, thank you to the speakers, thank you to our government partners and to our sponsors, in particular to eSynergy, again, our platinum partner for today. We started off by, this is all about data, public service data live. We've talked a lot about new technologies and about AI, but we kept coming back to the importance of data and getting the basics right about how we manage data, share it, use it. All of those things have to be in place if we're going to maximize the potential of the new technologies, including AI. And that's all going to be you doing all of that tremendous work. So my final thing is thank you to all of you, the audience. You had great engagement, great questions throughout the day. You have certainly earned yourself a drink. And I am now delighted to invite you all to a reception that will take place in the exhibition out there. Free drinks, have a drink on us, and you can use that opportunity, I think, as well to network with some of the speakers who are still here, and questions if you want to meet each other as well. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the day and enjoyed the reception. Thanks, everyone.